something subtly changed the night Alysa Liu won gold at the Olympics. Not just the mood, not just the drought, not just the drawline. February 19th, 2026. The women's free skate is called Milan Cortina. Since 2002, the United States had not produced an Olympic champion in this sport. 24 years. A whole generation was raised without ever seeing an American take the top step. Nevertheless, if you paid close attention, the narrative didn't seem like a desperate attempt to break a curse. It was serene. Alysa didn't appear to be being pursued when she got onto the ice. She didn't appear tense. She didn't have the appearance of someone attempting to make history right. She appeared as though she was going to do something she truly wanted to do. Figure skating at its best has never been based on comfort, so that aspect is more important than it might seem. It has been based on accuracy, selflessness, and a fear of making mistakes. Millimeters, judges, panels, revolutions, edges, and unblinking looking. Control is rewarded in this sport. She skated to Donna Summer's MacArthur Park suite that evening. Not a melancholy violin pleading for component scores, nor a sorrowful concerto. Gold fabric capturing arena light disco confidence. It might have backfired, but it didn't. She executed 7 flawless triple leaps. Just flow, efficiency, quick landings, and sprinting out of them rather than dying under them. No frantic quad bet, no careless last-minute danger. Her ultimate score was 2.26. 7.9. However, the most peculiar aspect wasn't the numbers. The throng was the most peculiar aspect. They were not responding as if they had seen someone survive. They responded as if they had seen permission. That is not the same. Take a moment to be honest. Did the program feel like someone breathing or like pressure? Because the real headline might be that difference. The story of women's skating became mechanical for many years. Bigger jumps, younger bodies, push earlier, burn faster, replace sooner. You could notice the pattern even though it wasn't official policy. That pattern had originally included Alysa. In 2019, at the age of 13, she became the youngest U.S. national champion ever. While most were still learning consistency, she managed to land 3 axels. At 16, she entered Beijing in 2022 with both anticipation and suspicion. After that, she departed. No spectacular statement, no scandal, just retirement. Many referred to it as burnout. It was dubbed wasted potential by others. Some referred to it as an error. What transpired next is intriguing. She didn't aim to maximize anything in her life. Travel friends, college, music selections unrelated to score sheets, and a visual identity that defied the traditional ice princess stereotype. Additionally, it wasn't shown as redemption when she returned in early 2024. It was never quite the right word. It was more akin to recalibration. Something had changed in her skating by the time the 2026 games came along. It was evident in the way the elements changed. Movements appeared deliberate rather than forced, with less haste and more ownership. In the past, figure skating was straightforward. The athlete gives it their all. The value is determined by the system. The exchange felt different that evening in Milan. She wasn't using the machine to skate. She was working with it as a skater. It's a subtle feature that is frequently missed. Her gold medal is said to have broken from its ribbon during the celebration following the team event earlier in the games. Officials offered to swap it out. She said no. Some dismissed it as eccentric, yet gestures are important, particularly in highly regulated Olympic settings. Nothing about that week happened in a vacuum. Whether she addressed it or not, the Federation's pressure, the story of the 24-year drought, and the incessant comparisons to previous champions all revolved around her performance. However, the tone was never defensive. In Olympic sports, that is uncommon. It was shocking when Sarah Hughes emerged victorious in 2002. It was inevitable when previous champions prevailed. It felt completely different with Alysa in 2026, as if the sport itself was blinking. The common understanding has been straightforward. She put an end to the drought. She finished the comeback. She proved the doubters wrong. It's all true. However, the atmosphere in the arena is not explained by such reading. It doesn't explain why observers kept bringing up how at ease she appeared. It doesn't explain why younger skaters in mixed zones were learning instead of merely cheering. This is the awkward query beneath the gold medal. What if there was a sudden change in the winning formula? Not the technical manual, not the scoring system, and not the formula that determines the type of contestant who could win. The old script would have been strengthened if she had prevailed solely on the basis of terror and extreme difficulties. Rather, she prevailed via control, execution, and a clear sense of choice. Elite women's skating has never been connected with the word choice. And that could be the point at which things start to go wrong. Because it doesn't remain confined to a single podium when an athlete demonstrates that joy and structure can coexist at the greatest level. Silently, it spreads. Not simply a champion was crowned on the Milan ice. It may have provided an answer to a question the sport was unaware it was posing. And there are repercussions for that response. Hold on before someone claims that this was unavoidable. It wasn't. The notion that a returning skater who publicly resigned at the age of 16 would return and win Olympic gold without pursuing the most difficult technical layout is unrealistic if you go back 10 or even 5 years. That would have come across as naive. Particularly for women, figure skating developed into an extremely basic sport. Rotate younger, more, and earlier. The currency was quadruple jumps. Risk turned into a reputation. Suffering was rewarded by the environment, even though it wasn't formally required. It wasn't by coincidence that the time was chaotic. Federations sought to rule the world. Scores were exaggerated. The technical-based values increased. Instead of discussing programming, commentators began discussing weapons. Prodigies in their youth were accelerated. Bodies peaked around age 17 and vanished by age 19. There was nothing unlawful about such system. However, it was also not impartial. In 2019, 13-year-old Alysa Liu, who has triple axels, became the youngest U.S. champion ever. She was a fantastic fit for the design. She was heralded as the future. A technical solution to worldwide powerhouses. Prodigies were adored by the machine. To be fair, prodigies enjoyed competing. Prodigies, however, get older. She placed 6th by Beijing 2022. Strong and respectable. However, there was a quietness about her interviews if you looked attentively. Something more subdued, not rage or disappointment. She retired a few weeks later. At the time, the prevailing reading was predictable. Excessive pressure, burnout, and lost momentum. A portion of the problem was resolved by that explanation. It wasn't a complete solution, because whether or not it is presented that way, leaving an elite sport at the age of 16 is an act of rebellion. Systems are not built by federations with pauses in mind. Sabbaticals are not celebrated by sponsors. Uncertainty is not the foundation of television contracts. Nevertheless, she departed. This is when things start to get interesting. She didn't come back with a story of retaliation. Neither domination nor promising quads were returned by her. She came back with something much more unsettling but less spectacular. Command. It is rare for the word to appear in headlines. It's not ostentatious. However, control over training structure, choreography, music, and pacing is key in high-performance systems. In the past, athletes' opinions were rarely given priority while making judgments. Programs were designed with judging trends in mind. The costumes were designed to meet aesthetic standards. In order to optimize component ratings, emotional expression was shaped. Execution came first. Identity came next. Not loudly, not with speeches, but quietly, Alysa reversed that order. It wasn't a demolition tour for her 2024 return season. It was measured, layouts were modified, clean execution was prioritized over maximal base value. There were fewer careless attempts at bone-crushing quads, and edge quality, transitions, and program cohesiveness were given more attention. It was questioned by certain critics. Is that sufficient on a global scale? A legitimate inquiry. There were a lot of skaters pursuing technical ceilings in the women's division at the time. Joining that escalation would have been a safer course of action. She didn't. Here's the unsettling reality. Perhaps the novelty was that constraint, as everyone was conditioned by the system to think that supremacy equates with difficulty. Complete stop. However, skating has two sides. Mechanics and presence, technical score, and program elements and numbers and interpretation. The second half started to feel decorative at some point. It didn't in Milan. Her free skate was not designed as a test of survival. It was made like a performance supposed to endure 4 minutes without cracking. Out of the landing, each triple carried speed. Every spin had a clean center. The step sequences show no signs of desperation, no signs of panic. It's simple to confuse composure with simplicity. It isn't. Under Olympic illumination, composure is architectural. Yes, conditioning is necessary, but liberty is also necessary. Tiny shifts reveal the difference between athletes who feel trapped in the moment and those who own it. The shoulder posture enters spin half a second after landing. Information that judges perceive even when viewers are not aware of it. Here's something you don't often say aloud. Federations keep an eye on one another. Conversations change behind closed doors when programs loaded with high-risk instabilities are outperformed by a layout that stresses execution excellence. Coaching techniques change. Talent pipelines adapt. Gradually, not all at once. Many people's interpretations of her gold were straightforward and consoling. She triumphed over hardship. That's just one version. This is an additional version. She showed that there might be other options besides the current technical arms race. This is disruptive because the incentive structure recalibrates if hazardous chaos can be outscored by clean, confident triples with good execution grades. Additionally, the old deal's psychological hold loosens if athletes see that breaking away didn't wreck her trajectory, and that autonomy didn't ruin competitiveness. Take note of another aspect of that Italian week. She wasn't portrayed in the media as a martyr for punishment. They framed her as balanced, serene, even cheerful. Once more, joy destabilizes systems that are based on a fear of making mistakes. This commentary is not sentimental, it is structural. For a long time, elite female skaters have relied on an implicit transaction. If you offer the sport all in advance, you might receive medals before your window ends. That timeline was broken by Alysa. She departed. When she came back, she was older. She prevailed. Not only does that sequence alter headlines, though, it pushes the boundaries of a career's permissible trajectory. Additionally, development models need to adapt as career arcs do. The previous agreement stated urgency. Her trajectory was indicative of longevity. These are not minor distinctions. They change young athletes' perceptions of their sport's future. They change the speed at which coaches escalate technical issues. They change the way federations determine investment schedules. Although a single podium cannot completely change a system, it can highlight other options. Alternatives are also difficult to remove once they become apparent. There was more to Milan's events than just the end of a 24-year drought. It might have been the start of an entirely different contract, and agreements, especially unwritten ones, can be subtly changed, sometimes without the sport's knowledge. Every sport has a point at which spectators recognize they are seeing more than just the outcome. It's not that loud. It doesn't make an announcement. It's a feeling. About halfway through Alysa Liu's free skate in Milan, that feeling became apparent. Not at the last stance, not after the last leap. In the middle. She had just achieved yet another flawless triple flowing exit. No skid, no check. When the step sequence started, she leaned into it with her head up, shoulders open, and eyes focused on the audience rather than bracing herself for the next element. It registered at that point. She was not going to make it through the Olympics. It was being used by her. That distinction is important. Elite skating appeared to be containment for many years, particularly under Olympic pressure. With their eyes locked on the ice as if they were diffusing a gadget, athletes clamped their teeth between elements and held tension in their necks. It wasn't optional to be perfect. It was oxygen. Milan, however, had a distinct vibe. Interestingly, this change didn't start in that field. For 2 seasons, it had been forming. When she came back in 2024, people noticed a small difference. Her regimens were no longer designed with peak difficulty periods in mind. They were organized according to continuity. The design was breathing. There was pace rather than cramming the highest base value leaps early to get points. Risk distributed strategically, recovery buffer built in. Program design of that type is not passive. It's intentional. This was the bit that was not glamorized behind the scenes. Restoring endurance, adjusting jump time, and handling training intensity with confidence rather than panic. While nothing about the process is particularly noteworthy, it does contribute to sustainability. Furthermore, the women's field has not traditionally embraced the concept of sustainability. This is where the layers come in. Figure skating is not evaluated in a vacuum. Seasons have an impact on trends. Expectations are recalibrated by what achieves good execution grades 1 year. In addition to technical accuracy, component ratings also show musical interpretation, skating prowess, and transitions. Commentators discuss technical content ceilings and backloading danger for years. However, you can practically hear coaching rooms recalculating when a program promotes cleanliness and cohesiveness while winning Olympic gold without optimizing theoretical difficulty. Internal, not public. Because federations are concerned with how, not merely who wins. The cost-benefit analysis changes if the score spread favors calm over chaos. Cycles of training adapt. Younger skaters don't jump into ultra-C elements so quickly that their bodies have time to adjust. Quads do not vanish as a result. It implies that they are no longer the sole form of payment. It is a structural change. Her free skate score of 152 in Milan wasn't particularly high by arms race standards, but it was effective. The sum of 2.26. 7.9 produced a spectacle-free separation. It was a combination of emotional clarity and technical precision. The end of the drought was the main theme of the subsequent reading. That makes sense. The plot of 24 years is clear. However, Milan's suggestion was not that the US had finally found another prodigy to break through the system. Therefore, the more intriguing storyline is frequently obscured by the simpler one. It implied that a distinct athlete profile might be accommodated by the system. Rigid systems are uncomfortable with someone who is older, more independent, and less reliant on institutional urgency. However, there was nothing rebellious about that week. She was not critical of the sport. She did not condemn its history. She competed within its guidelines. She simply failed to absorb its fears. Confrontation and indifference are 2 different things. Headlines are generated by confrontation. Culture is altered by indifference. When compared to the current world champions from South Korea or Japan, she didn't seem threatened. She didn't skate like a story defender. She skated as if she were comparing her own performance to her own expectations. That stance alters how pressure seems, particularly during the Olympics. There is still pressure. It always does. However, it did not possess her. Athletes who are younger than her, 17 or 16, watch that. They perceive more than simply technique. Time is visible to them. They recognize that a career need not reach its zenith as soon as possible. it becomes possible to imagine longevity. Additionally, urgency loses some of its hold once longevity is conceivable. This is an additional layer that is rarely discussed. Tone of the media. Her victory was not portrayed as atonement in the media. It was not. She returned to avenge Beijing, or rather, she skated freely. Words matter. Narratives become templates. Sponsors respond to that tone. Broadcasters echo it. Coaches absorb it. Nothing about this happens in a vacuum, even the aesthetic choice. Disco, Donna Summer. Gold dress catching arena light instead of a somber classic.